Hey, I got a question for you. How bad does it have to be for the government to hide the dollar amount of how much it's spent on any project? I mean, every day, and especially on budget day, the government shows us just how bad it is because they have to. And they brazen it out and they talk about investments. That's just a fancy way of saying spending. But how awful is the truth if the government will do anything to stop the numbers from seeing the light of day? Well, that's exactly what's going on these days with regards to the gun buyback program. Let me read to you the latest release from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. It's entitled Ottawa Blocks Details a Failed Cape Breton Pilot Project. Let me just read the first sentence and then I'll bring the Taxpayers Federation into this. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation is launching a legal fight after the federal government refused to disclose the details of the gun confiscated during the failed Cape Breton pilot project. I bet they spent like 10 grand a gun. The government is spending hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayers' money in this program. They deserve to know exactly what's happening with the money, says Gage, Haubrich, CTF Prairie Director. The government should not be pushing forward with its gun confiscation nationally while leaving taxpayers in the dark on these important details. And joining us now from Saskatoon is Gage Haubrich. Great to have you on the show. Thanks for being here. I just said it probably costs $10,000 a gun. No, it's probably much, much more than that. I forgot. We're dealing with what, a 9-figure expenditure?
Yeah, well, I mean, just like in that access and information request we got back, the government's been kind of mum on the entire numbers when it comes to this gun confiscation scheme. I mean, Ezra, you rightly point out that the government's usually proud of all of the money they're wasting on budget day. But even when it comes to this gun ban scheme, they're keeping those numbers close to heart because they know how awful it's going to be for taxpayers, right? We saw way back in 2020 when the government first talked about this program, it would cost $200 million, they said. Now we've seen other experts 6 years on say more than $6 billion. And when you're spending that kind of money, taxpayers deserve to know what it's being spent on. That's why we asked the government this simple question. In your Cape Breton pilot project where you confiscated these 25 guns, where the government, by the way, wanted to confiscate 200, what guns did you collect? Yeah. Were they these weapons of war that the public safety minister is scaring us about? Or were they plinkers or old antique hunting rifles? Yeah. Right? So we asked the government that very simple question. They refused to give us the answer, likely because they're embarrassed about what those documents show.
Yeah, if the whole project only collected 25 firearms, I think my earlier comment about $10,000 a gun is going to be insanely low. You know, it's not that common for police to speak out against a justice minister or a public safety minister. You just don't see it a lot. And I think that's proper. I don't want my police being any more political than they are. But this gun buyback idea is so stupid that one police force after another have gone public and saying, we aren't going to do this. I mean, let me give you an example. Here's the Toronto Police Association, one of the largest police unions in the country. Quote, and this is, I'm reading from your publication here, "We know that the gun buyback program is going to have essentially zero impact on the crime in Toronto," said Clayton Campbell, president of the Toronto Police Association. And then you note that dozens of local police take the same position. There is a massive crime wave in this country, and it's not farmers and duck hunters and ranchers with the firearm they inherited from their grandpa or an antique that their grandpa brought back from World War II. It's just not. What's the real motivation for this? Because all the police are saying this won't have anything to do with crime. Is it just for show? Is it for them to tell Montreal and Toronto Liberal voters, hey guys, we're really going after the gun criminal? Like, what is the point of it?
Well, I think the biggest point there is, as you mentioned, cops being political. It takes a lot for those guys who are just focused on the everyday of doing their jobs and actually enforcing the laws to stand up and say, hey, this policy, it's not going to work. It's a bad idea, right? Because you mentioned the crime wave we're seeing across the country. We're seeing other police forces like the president of the RCMP union who said that we need to be focusing on that crime. And that crime is not committed by the duck hunters and the sport shooters. It's by people with illegal guns who smuggle them from other countries. And this ban does nothing to do anything with that. The confiscation does nothing to stop that, because the important fact of the matter is, when we look at it, is if you have a gun illegally in your possession, so you're a criminal, you can't turn it in to the feds under this program.
Oh.
The only people who the feds can take guns from are people who have followed the law.
Really? So you can't just walk up. You can't just be a guy and walk up and say, I found this gun. So you're saying?
Yeah, there's no amnesty for that. In the law, as it's written on the amnesty order, it only applies to people who previously owned the gun legally.
Then
so
by definition, you're not going to have any criminals. Like literally, the rules say you can't have a criminal do it if you have to have a gun license to turn a gun in. Oh my God, I didn't even know that fact.
Exactly. So the only people who are going to turn this in are the people who are the most law-abiding, or even though the government's doing a policy they probably disagree with, they think it's their duty to follow the law. Not a single criminal is going to be participating in this because they're not allowed to.
That is so dumb. Let me read the last sentence of your press release. The premiers of Alberta, Saskatchewan, the Yukon, Manitoba, they're NDP, by the way, Ontario, they're pretend liberals, by the way, the Northwest Territories, Newfoundland and Labrador, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick all say that their provinces will not participate in the program because it is unlikely to make Canadians safer. Like, other than Quebec, I think, I don't know if there's anyone I didn't say on that list. Like, no one thinks this is a good idea.
Yeah, you don't get that kind of consensus in this country unless it's Olympic hockey, which we're going to be looking at pretty soon. You never get these premiers, right? Alberta and Saskatchewan rarely agree with Manitoba on anything. They definitely don't agree with Newfoundland and Labrador. But all of these premiers have stood up, no matter their political stripe, and said, this is a bad program. It's going to waste provincial resources that we want to use to actually keep people safer. All it's going to do is take guns away from the safest people in our communities. It makes absolutely no sense to participate in. You know, even Wab Kinew, the NDP Premier of Manitoba, just talked about how much of a headache this program seems to be. And even his government likes to waste money on the craziest stuff. So when those premiers are talking about the huge amount of waste from Ottawa, everyone should perk up and be like, this is time for this program to go.